Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rawk. You know what they say, third tries the charm. Nintendo tried stereoscopic 3D once with the Virtual Boy, twice with the GameCube, and finally found success their third time around with the Nintendo 3DS. So if Nintendo can have a successful third attempt, then surely I can too. I think it's about time I try my hand at a third fruit-based business idea. I promise, I'm not addicted. I'll just have to go to rehab if this doesn't work out. So, apple tennis, anybody? It's pretty simple. It's just like tennis, but instead of a ball, you use an apple. And if you win, you even get to eat the apple. Want to give it a go? Alright. That was an iPhone.
Nintendo's handhelds have always been their most successful consoles, but they were always missing one integral feature: the ability to feel Kirby.
He feels unsettlingly human.
The Nintendo 3DS, released on March 25th, 2011 here in the UK. And this, right here, is my favourite handheld console of all time. This system notoriously released at the beginning of a pretty miserable era for Nintendo. Their insanely popular Nintendo Wii was losing steam at a pretty staggering pace, as was the Nintendo DS. And the next generation of Nintendo was right around the corner with the Nintendo Wii U, which meant that we were a few short months away from the apocalypse. In amongst all of this was when this little portable released. And initially, it did not buck the trend of making Nintendo employees question their motives. Nintendo began development of this system in 2009 as a straight-up, no-nonsense follow-up to the Nintendo DS. But this is Nintendo we're talking about. Every system of theirs needs a gimmick. The DS was only as big of a success as it was thanks to its dual screens, touchscreen, and casual focus. So to simply do that again wasn't gonna cut it, at least not in Nintendo's eyes. If you ask consumers if they'd buy a DS that was the same but more powerful, most of them would probably just say yes. You ask Shinya Takahashi, he cusses you out in 4 different languages. So, Nintendo decided to revisit a concept they had tried multiple times before to see if they could make it a unique selling point for this up-and-coming system: stereoscopic 3D technology. Nintendo has always been pretty attached to this idea, and experimented with it as early as the 1980s. But the two biggest instances of them f***ing it up were the Virtual Boy and the Nintendo GameCube. The Virtual Boy did have stereoscopic 3D, but was only able to utilize a black and red display for cost-saving purposes. How did you manage to fuck that one up? This system is one of Nintendo's biggest failures. Being a soap dish on stilts with no head tracking and no colors, nobody really wanted it. So Nintendo looked at the tech inside it and said, how do we fail more? When developing the GameCube, Nintendo built in true stereoscopic 3D support. No need for turkey legs and a colorblind diagnosis. You wouldn't have to compromise with 3D GameCube experiences. You just have to empty your bank account. The technology was once again too expensive, and the add-on that would have allowed the GameCube to make use of the tech never ended up releasing, and even if it did, only Luigi's Mansion was designed to be able to utilize it. After it had been proven multiple times that this stereoscopic 3D dream of theirs was becoming increasingly unattainable, Nintendo took a step back to evaluate some things. They began to realize that this idea was one that they should probably put to rest, and they eventually reached the conclusion of, well, what else would make people want to buy a new Nintendo DS?
I swear to God, don't come crying to me if you fail at this again.
The follow-up to the Nintendo DS was unveiled to the public on March 23rd, 2010, now going by the Nintendo 3DS. That's not confusing at all. The system launched alongside a selection of games, and while the system generally received positive reviews, it did not sell very well. So much so, in fact, that Nintendo had to cut the price of the system substantially.
I f***ing warned you, but you didn't listen!
The launch lineup for this system was pretty lacking in all honesty, with only 3 games being made by Nintendo themselves, and those 3 games being Nintendogs Pilot Wings and Steel Diver. Not bad games by any means. Nintendogs plus Cats and Pilot Wings Resort make any 3DS collection worth half a damn, and Steel Diver is unique. But when these three and a bunch of mediocre third-party games are all the system offered at launch, it's clear to see why the console struggled initially. Now, the Nintendo 3DS is a beaut of a console. Clearly taking a lot of inspiration from the DS Lite, this system looks like a galactic slice of cake, and I love it! The original model has a glossy finish, which makes it widely prone to becoming fingerprint city if you do so much as look at it funny. And while I generally prefer a more matte look to my consoles, the original 3DS is an absolutely gorgeous bit of tech. I personally got the red model at launch, and this is still the way I primarily play 3DS games. All of the different colors this system comes in are absolutely stunning, and I honestly wouldn't be opposed to trying to nab a full set for this model. But Nintendo clearly looked at this design a few weeks after it released and said,
What did we do?
The Nintendo 3DS received 6 revisions. Jesus Christ almighty! If I had a P for every 3DS revision, I'd still be hungry, but it would make for a nice snack. We got the Nintendo 3DS XL on July 20th, 2012, the Nintendo 2DS on October 12th, 2013, the new 3DS and new 3DS XL on February 15th, 2015, and the new 2DS XL on July 28th, 2017. And of all of these, the new 2DS XL was the only one I bothered upgrading to. Why? I don't know why. I guess I thought the stripy black design combined with the blue trim was pretty nice, which is an opinion I stand by. But functionality-wise, I do have some gripes with this model. The bigger screen is really damn nice, and honestly makes it hard to go back to the original model after a while. The additions of the ZL and ZR buttons and a nipple are nice, but the placement of some things is just pretty gross. The stylus is on the bottom of the system, which kind of disturbs me. The speaker is on the bottom of the system, where my fucking palm would be, and the cartridge slot has been moved to the bottom of the system, and is now covered by a cat flap. Why are you like this? It's needlessly tedious to swap out games on this model, but the fact that I have 2 systems means I don't have to do that very often, so it's whatever, I suppose. I do plan on going for a full set of 3DS models one day, and the fact that I'm nowhere near that point means I can't really comment on any other model. But as it stands, I don't think we needed this many, Nintendo.
The 3DS at face value just seems like another Nintendo DS. And while that's true, Nintendo didn't want you knowing that. You'd be less likely to give them money. So the 3DS does have a few key features to make it stand out from that system, such as the Circle Pad, your one-way ticket to full 3D movement on a handheld device. Mine comes with the fun quirk of having a detachable foreskin. But the headline feature of this console is, and always has been, the glasses-free 3D. Tell that to my fucking prescription.
The Nintendo 3DS was being developed right around the time that 3D movies were hitting it big, because people went to see Avatar in 3D and forgot to boycott it. A lot of 3D tech was coming out around that time, and all of them required you to wear glasses for the effect to work.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So, Nintendo's big marketing push for the system was 3D gaming, but the glasses can go f*** themselves. The future is now, bitches! So right out of the box, the Nintendo 3DS fully supported glasses-free stereoscopic 3D. A 3-decade-old dream finally came to fruition. The system has a slider that allows you to control how much the 3D pops out of the screen, and a decent chunk of the system's library is compatible with it. Almost all of the first-party titles make use of the 3D effect, but they all do so to different degrees. I know the 3D was a big gimmick and is something we can all look back and laugh at, but I'll be damned, the 3D effect in most games that use it is really solid. Being able to control exactly how 3D things get is honestly a big contributing factor in that. But the effect is just straight up well executed. Games that utilize it properly, like Super Mario 3D Land, are genuinely enhanced by it being there. But the thing is, it's far from necessary. All games can be played without the 3D slider turned up, and a lot of games aren't enhanced by the effect more than it just being neat to look at, which caused a lot of people to say, "That's cool," then turn the slider back down and never look back. Hell, of all of the 3DS models released, only 2/3 of them even have a 3D effect built in. Even Nintendo knew that most people probably weren't getting the most out of this effect.
It was worth going blind for. As a piece of hardware on its own, the Nintendo 3DS is an incredibly interesting system, evolving the DS form factor in really compelling ways, while still staying true to what that system was trying to accomplish. But it just wouldn't be a Nintendo system without a first-party lineup, and the games that the 3DS has to offer are what make this the strangest little console Nintendo ever released. The 3DS is home to some stellar games, but it's also home to some absolute garbage. So much so that it's actually pretty up in the air whether or not the overall library for the system can be considered good. For every great 3DS game, it's almost guaranteed that there's one that's mediocre at best. Nintendo's output for this system was so damn divisive. So, let's see what this system had to offer.
As I've already said, Nintendo didn't offer much at the system's launch. Nintendogs plus Cats and Pilot Wings Resort were fun little distractions, the former expanding upon the most bafflingly popular DS series, and the latter reviving a series that's been dead since the N64 era, but injecting Mii's and Woohoo Island from the Wii Sports series. And Steel Diver is that uncle that you don't dislike, but if he wasn't family, you'd want fuck all to do with him. But that's not all the 3DS offered at launch. This system came with pre-installed software. That's not really a brag because a clock fits that definition. But there was some really good stuff on offer here, like face raiders. Take pictures of the faces of you and your loved ones and fight off hordes of heads using the 3DS's AR capabilities. Speaking of which, AR cards. Little cards that came bundled in with the system that allowed you to bring characters to life. Simply scan the card with the 3DS's camera and boom, Mario is real!
And you want to try and tell me you don't love this system?
The Mii Maker made a return from the Nintendo Wii, and was really cool to see on a handheld finally, but not as cool as the application it worked alongside, the ME Plaza. The ME Plaza is potentially the best case for the personality and charm of this system. It's genuinely one of the coolest things Nintendo has ever done. When carrying your 3DS out and about, your system could be tagged by another 3DS system near you, and doing so would allow you to meet the Mii of the other person near you who was playing 3DS. Meeting multiple Miis allowed you to play games like this cute little RPG where certain Miis have certain strengths. It allowed you to collect puzzle pieces to complete loads of little pieces of Nintendo artwork. You could see what games the people you bumped into had been playing recently. God, it was such a blast. This was such a unique social experience that Nintendo was under absolutely no obligation to include. But by doing so, they allowed for one of the most charming uses of a handheld device ever conceived. This feature defined the 3DS. And even separate from the rest of the system's strengths, this allowed the system to carve a legacy of its own right from the get-go. A little while after launch is when things finally started to heat up though. We got some remakes of N64 games in the form of Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask 3D, and Star Fox 64 3D, but everybody was waiting for the two series that define any Nintendo console: 3D Mario and Mario Kart. Super Mario 3D Land was the first handheld 3D Mario by a sheer technicality. We don't want to count Super Mario 64 DS in this statistic, it's an ex-convict. Super Mario 3D Land is without question the most nostalgia-ridden game on this system for me. The sound design takes me right back to being a kid and not knowing what the a Tanuki was. A lot of people lament that this game is a bit too on the easy side. You can breeze through it without much thought, and it's a bit shorter than you might expect too. A lot of people feel that this makes 3D Land a worse 3D Mario experience, but I'd argue that it's the perfect 3D Mario experience for a handheld. I love Super Mario 3D Land. The level designs are just bite-sized enough to make them consistently and repeatedly enjoyable for handheld play. The controls and gameplay are wicked solid for a 3DS platformer, and I honestly think the game is the perfect length for me to want to keep replaying it again and again and again. This game is also the best case for why the 3D effect was a good idea, as you're able to much more accurately land jumps and judge depth when you turn that slider up. But you can still totally play the game comfortably without it on. I honestly think 3D Land is a fantastic game, and it's clear why after this game released, that's when the 3DS started to finally see some form of success. Mario Kart 7 probably helped a little bit more though. Mario Kart 7 is such a strange game to me. It's one that I very rarely even remember exists. It's by far the most forgettable Mario Kart game, and that's saying a lot when Super Circuit exists. So that makes it seem like it's a bad game. Far from it! Going back and playing this game has made me realize how damn good it is. Nowadays, it obviously boils down to a more primitive version of Mario Kart 8, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Chibi Robo is a more primitive version of sex, and I'd take Chibi Robo any day. The roster in this one is really funky too, but I love that. So many of these characters don't make sense to be here, which is exactly why I'm happy that they're here. It really gives this game its own identity. If nothing else, it's the one where you can drive as a caterpillar. Well, we're 2 for 2 with good 3DS games so far, so let's keep that ball rolling with the best 3DS game!
Is it fair to say that Nintendo peaked when they released Animal Crossing New Leaf? And if it's not, does that mean I'm at an advantage?
Animal Crossing New Leaf. Oh boy. Do I ever have opinions about this game? Releasing in November 2012, this game was my introduction to the Animal Crossing series, and I wholeheartedly believe that I could not have had a better game do that for me. Animal Crossing New Leaf is a game that I love more than almost any other in the world, and there are so many reasons why. This game takes the pre-established Animal Crossing formula and gives it a really unique spin, where instead of simply being a resident of the town you move into, like in the past game, you're the mayor of this town, which opens up a wealth of new and exciting gameplay opportunities. Being the mayor gives you levels of creative control over your town that were simply unheard of prior to this game, which in turn made the moment-to-moment gameplay that much more enjoyable and charming. The Public Works project system allowed for you to initiate projects that would allow brand new things to be built around your town. From something as little as the lamppost or a bench, to something as big as the Roost Cafe or the police station, which both allowed fan-favorite characters to return. The types of projects that were available differed from player to player, as a lot of them were suggested to you by your villagers, meaning that each and every town has its own additional layer of individuality. Most of the Public Works projects offer some form of interactivity, and even if they don't, they're all so visually interesting and help your town feel more alive than ever. This, combined with Main Street, a refinement of City Folk's city concept, Tortimer Island, a tropical paradise offering a wealth of mini-games and an eternal summer to catch rare creatures in, and the sheer volume of things to do with your villagers means that you will truly never run out of things to do in New Leaf. The amount of content on offer is staggering, and impresses me even all these years later. This game is an absolute treasure. It's my greatest gaming happy place. My feelings for this game are so strong that I don't even have to play the game to indulge in them. Simply listening to the blissful soundtrack of this game is enough to fill me up with the unmatched happiness that this game provides. And I will always be grateful for that. But I'll be more grateful for arthritis. Kid Icarus Uprising, one of the only non-Smash related things Sakurai has worked on in recent memory, and a revival of the long-dead Kid Icarus series. This is one of the most ambitious games on the system, and is really quite good, but it just does not control comfortably. This game requires you to move around with the circle pad, aim with the touchscreen, and shoot with the L button. This doesn't sound all too bad, but for extended play sessions, this can begin to really hurt your wrists. So much so that the game came bundled in with a stand for your 3DS. That's a lovely way to not get sued. While we're on the topic of Sakurai, Super Smash Bros. For 3DS. The first ever portable Smash Bros. Game, something we've been dreaming of since the GBA days. It's finally real, and it's honestly really good. Super Smash Bros. Works fantastically on the 3DS. It's just a shame that the 3DS doesn't work all that well for Smash Brothers. My foreskin wasn't always detachable, you know. Retrospectively, I can nitpick Smash 4 all day long, but I'll take my opinion that the 3DS version is better than the Wii U version to the grave. With a handheld version of Smash, you're already easing up your expectations because you know it's going to be a compromised experience. And that makes all of my gripes with this game a lot easier to bear. which cannot be said about its Wii U counterpart. I much prefer the stage selection in the 3DS version, and Smash 4's roster is really damn good. For the first attempt at a handheld Smash Bros game, I think Smash for 3DS blew past all of our expectations in almost every way possible, which is why it needed a piss-dumb name. It would have been too powerful otherwise. Zelda was pretty interesting on the 3DS. No original 3D Zelda, because they were reserved for home consoles at this point, but as I've already mentioned, we did see the beginning of the 3D Zelda remakes, with Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 3D. These are some excellent remakes, and in some ways, the definitive way of experiencing these games. Although I'd say this is more the case for Ocarina of Time 3D, as Majora's Mask 3D has some questionable quirks compared to the original. In terms of original Zelda games, we have A Link Between Worlds and Triforce Heroes. Did you notice the asterisk? Link Between Worlds is a new Zelda game, but it reuses the map from Link to the Past, so it's on thin ice. This game is a damn solid entry in the Zelda series. It isn't all that limited by the fact that it reuses the map from the Super Nintendo game. Even less so because I haven't beaten that game yet. It takes that version of Hyrule and recontextualizes it to provide a wholly unique and thoroughly enjoyable adventure. The wall merging mechanic offers a whole new way of traversal, which opens the door for some really unique puzzle design, and the whole item renting shtick allows for this game to have a pseudo non-linear structure, which is a fascinating thing to see a pre-Breath of the Wild Zelda game attempt, and a 2D Zelda nonetheless. A lot of 3DS games fit into two categories: good considering the hardware, and good regardless of the hardware. With games like Super Smash Bros. For 3DS, the best way to describe them is, whoa, that game works really well considering it's on the 3DS. But games like A Link Between Worlds, they're good games that just so happen to be on the 3DS. Its identity doesn't really feel tied to this console. It stands completely on its own 2 feet and is a wonderful experience. And that would still be true if it wasn't a 3DS game. And then there's Triforce Heroes.
We need to open up a third category called bad.
I mean, it's not a terrible game, but I don't think anybody's got it sat on their bedside table. It's not that great. As a game you play once, have an alright time with, and never think about again, it's passable, and the UK localization is infinitely better than the North American version. But I don't think this is a necessary game for even the most die-hard Zelda fans. If anything, it was just cool to see the concept of Four Swords Adventures make a comeback in a much more easily accessible form factor. Metroid was also pretty funky on the 3DS. A remake, a spin-off, and an angry mob. That's a good sign. Metroid Samus Returns was a full-on remake of the Game Boy title Metroid 2 Return of Samus, taking a game that borders on unplayable and turning it into one of the greatest experiences the franchise has to offer. This game was made by Mercury Steam, who would later go on to make Metroid Dread, and they did a fantastic job here. Obviously they were limited with what they could do, with Samus Returns being a remake. They had to stick to all of the beats from the original game, but they took a lot of creative liberties that ended up paying off really well. The most controversial change in this game is the melee counter move, which allows you to block attacks from enemies, leaving them open for a counter attack. I personally thought this was nothing but a great addition to the gameplay, as it gives you a bit more power to deal with the creatures of SR388. But a lot of people think the game relied a bit too heavily on them, which I totally understand. Either way though, an outstanding Metroid game, and the best way to play Metroid 2, unquestionably. Metroid Prime Federation Force on the other hand, yikes! This game was made by Next Level Games and is a spin-off of the Prime series, and it came out at a bad time for Metroid fans. The last entry in the series at this point was Metroid Other M, and that already suffered from not being a great spin-off. So to have the next Metroid game 6 years later be another bad spin-off? Let's just say it felt good to eventually get Samus Returns the next year.
Spin-offs are where we get into dicey territory with 3DS games. There are a lot of them on this system, but a lot of them aren't really what fans wanted. That doesn't mean that all of them are bad, but most of them are.
Chibi, Robo, Ziplash. Wanna guess if I like this game or not? This game took one of Nintendo's most charming series and just completely shit on its legacy. The original Chibi Robo and its sequels were 3D open adventure games, where you'd explore mundane environments as a tiny robot and try to help the people who lived there. Along the way, you'd encounter incredibly unique and memorable characters, and the gameplay would evolve over time in a way that was both endlessly charming and infinitely enjoyable. Nintendo said, all of that? Chibi Robo's a 2D platformer now. Suck it up, bitch! This game is fucking horrible! Nothing about this game screams Chibi Robo other than the model used for the main character. It's so dull and slow and boring and lifeless. No part of this game is enjoyable. And the worst part of all of this is that they held the series hostage over this game's success. If you want more Chibi Robo games, you better buy Chibi Robo Ziplash. Maybe you should actually make a fucking Chibi Robo game instead of some bitch basic 2D side-scroller with some of the most infuriating mechanics known to man.
I have a lot of feelings about this game. And something tells me I haven't seen the last of it. We might be in the clear for a while now, so we might as well talk about a game that met the same fate.
Paper Mario Sticker Star! Grah! I fucking hate this game with every fiber of my being. Just like Ziplash, it took everything that made Paper Mario what it was, took it away, and replaced it with a bland, uninteresting world and agonizingly frustrating gameplay, culminating in a concoction of shit that spits in the face of what this series once stood for. But what about Hey Pigmen? I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as Ziplash and Sticker Star. I'm not an animal, I'm just a pussy. But it's definitely not a good Pikmin game, because it features the staple of lazy handheld conversions. Slow-paced 2D platforming. This game can be enjoyable, but I still don't think I like it all that much. And while we're on the topic of bad 3DS 2D platformers, Yoshi's New Island was pretty stinky. Again, it's not abysmal, it's just awful. The art style just doesn't work. The soundtrack is painfully bad, and the gameplay is mediocre at best. It's not even worth giving your time to, honestly. So where does that leave Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer? Alright, I'm probably gonna be the first person to do so, but I'm gonna defend this game. It's a really enjoyable little slice of Animal Crossing that puts focus on and enhances one of the most underrated yet enjoyable parts of the series. That being the home decoration, and the context in which you do said decorating are really fun. Maybe there's hope for 3DS spin-offs after all! Son of a bitch! Mario Party was disgusting on 3DS. Mario Party Island Tour was fine, Mario Party Star Rush was terrible, and Mario Party The Top 100 took a phenomenal concept, butchered the execution, and combined it with the terrible board game mode from Star Rush. Why are you this way? And then the Mario sports games, woof. Mario Golf World Tour was incredible. I cannot fault this game in any way, shape, or form. Mario Tennis Open was fine, but was pretty unremarkable and very forgettable. And Mario Sports Superstars was putrid! Mario and Luigi didn't fare much better in my opinion. Dream Team was okay, Paper Jam was stellar in concept and appallingly bad in execution, and the remakes were some of the most questionable releases in the entire system's library.
This is what I meant by the 3DS having such a divisive library. I can't stand so many of the games we just talked about. But the 3DS is also home to some of my favorite games of all time, and we haven't even gotten to all of the good stuff yet.
There were a ton of Pokemon games on the 3DS. X and Y, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun and Moon. As someone who knows an abundance of all about Pokemon, these games seemed like fantastic entries in this series. But looking online, they seem to be a lot more divisive among the diehard fans. From what I can tell, X and Y fine, Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire good, Sun and Moon bad, Ultra Sun and Moon fucking befuddling. Where do I stand with these games? As far away from them as possible. Luigi's Mansion finally made a return on the 3DS with Luigi's Mansion 2. God, is it that time of year already?
It's already time for me to not give this game my full attention.
This game definitely takes a lot of liberties with the formula compared to the GameCube original, naturally in an effort to make it better suited to handheld play. I actually think the constant interruptions make it less suitable for handheld play, but that's neither here nor there. I still think that despite its odd pacing, this is a phenomenal game, and more than worthy of receiving just as much praise as the original. Hell, they even remade the original for the 3DS in 2018. I mean, if you say so.
The original dream for Luigi's Mansion finally came true. Christ is born again, and he runs like piss.
New Super Mario Bros. 2 is probably the most creative game in the New Super Mario Bros. Series. Now granted, that isn't saying a lot, but I still find this game to be really damn enjoyable. The Coin Rush mode gives this game something of an evergreen element to it that only one other game has been able to replicate. That being the original New Super Mario Bros. With its wealth of minigames. But this is a completely different and wicked fun execution of that concept. To some extent, the New Super Mario Bros. Games are always going to offer a certain baseline level of fun, but New Super Mario Bros. 2 is incredibly charming in my opinion, and is probably one of the best games in this series. The coin collecting mechanic and general focus on gold may seem like it's a pretty shallow way to make this game stick out from the others, but I think it works really well. The game is just a blast to play through. Much like Super Mario 3D Land, it's not a particularly long or difficult game, but it's a perfect handheld Mario experience. Wario only got one game on the 3DS, and it was WarioWare Gold. A pretty damn solid best-of compilation of WarioWare. The best way to describe it is the concept of Mario Party the Top 100, but actually executed well. Another series with quick bite-sized pockets of gameplay, Rhythm Paradise Mega Mix. Much like the rest of this series, this game is fantastic. Tomodachi Life is one of the best games Nintendo has ever made. This game is fantastic. Sure, it's a little light in the content department, but the charm is through the roof. It's so unique and so funny, and it's consistently a joy to come back to. Much in the same way as Animal Crossing New Leaf, you probably aren't going to spend hours on end playing this game, and your play sessions are probably going to be pretty short, but that's exactly how they're designed to be played. And they make the absolute most of the short spurts of time that you play them for. Tomodachi Life always finds a new way to put a smile on my face, and I really appreciate that. And because of that, I don't think I'm gonna stop revisiting this game anytime soon. And finally, everybody's favorite little puffball Kirby had a wild ride on the 3DS. He had some spin-offs, sure, most of them were eShop titles or sub-games expanded into their own releases, but the main course here were the two original platformers he got, Kirby Triple Deluxe and Kirby Planet Robobot. These games are absolutely sublime. They each follow on from Kirby's Adventure Wii, and use the exact same formula as that game, but they both have their own unique twists on that formula that make them stand out from one another, and make them each a wicked fun time to play through. Triple Deluxe is a bit more generic Kirby, less so than Adventure Wii and Star Allies, mind you, but definitely more so than Planet Robobot. But that doesn't mean it's a lesser game. The level design is still top notch. The game offered some really fun and compelling concepts and is overall just a joy to play through. A nice, easygoing platformer to pull out whenever and wherever I damn well please. But then Planet Robobot, good lord! This game's thematic identity is unparalleled in this series. Seeing the entire world overcome by robots and mechs is cool enough, especially for Kirby, but having that bleed into the gameplay allows the theming to be tied with a neat little bow. The gameplay concepts and environments on display here are truly unmatched. I genuinely think this is one of the greatest platformers ever made. Definitely the best side-scroller on this system, and to me, it truly shows the strength of the 3DS's library.
I adore this system. The Nintendo 3DS definitely had its ups and downs, whether it be the system itself, its library, or its sales performance. It's not a flawless console. But my god, I just cannot stop myself from loving this thing. This is my favourite handheld system of all time. It had so many games that appealed to my exact specific tastes and were really fun experiences. And yet, I can actually understand if this console wasn't really for you. The Nintendo DS captured the world with its casual focus and dual screen innovation, and when you consider how big of a step up this console was from the GBA, the 3DS can seem kind of underwhelming in comparison. It doesn't really have that big pull factor outside of the 3D display and the great games, but the 3D was far from necessary and was stripped out of some models of the console, and while a lot of the library is great, some of the games on this system are some of the worst Nintendo has ever made. So if you don't think the 3DS is all that appealing, I completely understand that. But I think the things that the 3DS did right vastly outshadow the things it didn't, and makes this system one of the greatest Nintendo has ever offered. Hell, with all the revisions and price cuts, the Nintendo 3DS is probably the cheapest entry point into the world of Nintendo games and systems, and I feel like for a lot of its user base, that's exactly what it was. And while there are a couple of key franchises missing, I think the 3DS did a damn good job of providing all types of players a fun and memorable batch of games to play. It's not Nintendo's most successful handheld, but the Nintendo 3DS is, and always will be, my favourite handheld console of all time. Alright, maybe the glasses were the missing ingredient, so let's put them on, and then let's give this a swing. Okay, I'll give up.